The transition between video game console generations can be an interesting time. There's lots of uncertainty for stakeholders and gamers alike. Who will come out on top? Is gaming actually moving forward? Or are these fancy new boxes not worth investing in? One dilemma can be late releases. I remember growing up and weighing the option of buying the swan songs of the N64 in 2001 or saving up for a GameCube that was coming out later that year. The problem manifests for the game industry as well. Games can be delayed or released on a yearly basis, which may put it at odds with next-gen console launch dates. And with this, developers and publishers have to decide what systems they should be released for. Do they put all their resources on newly released consoles, or continue to serve an established user base? Most times, it's a little bit of both. For example, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess started its life as a GameCube game, but ended up being released on both the GameCube and the then new Nintendo Wii back in 2006. The same thing happened for Breath of the Wild on the Wii U and Switch respectively. Usually games with yearly increments like Madden and other sports titles are released on literally everything available at the time. In other instances, a flagship sequel on next-gen systems is accompanied by a secondary sequel or spin-off on the preceding systems. An example of this was with Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed Unity, released for the Xbox One and PS4 in November of 2014. Xbox 360 and PS3 owners still got a hold of an Assassin's Creed game with Assassin's Creed Rogue, which was released on the same day. Looking back, it's always interesting to see some of a system's last titles that may have been overlooked. Late in a console's life, developers have robust experience with a given game system and know what makes it tick. In some of these late release titles, we get stuff we wouldn't normally expect from a system. Usually this isn't what happens, as publishers will want to shove out remaining projects they have and squeeze what's left in a preceding generation's user base. Thinking about late release games, specifically for the Nintendo 64, prompted a question. What was the last Nintendo 64 game? If you didn't bother to search this on Google in the duration of this admittedly long intro, here it is. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, released in the States on August 20th, 2002. That means it's been 15 years since the last commercial release for the Nintendo 64. Activision, the publisher behind the Tony Hawk series, must have thought it was worth releasing since there were probably many people still using the Nintendo 64, even in 2002. While this is nothing crazy during the transitional period of console generation, what's interesting is how fragmented the releases were across consoles. Pro Skater 3 was released on the PS2 originally in October 2001. It was a launch title for the GameCube 1 month later, so it's interesting how they would take so long to release it on the N64. While the Xbox version came out in 2002 along with the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance versions, it makes you wonder what took the N64 version so long. As for Japan, the last Nintendo 64 game was Bomberman 64, released on December 20th, 2001. For those who own this Bomberman 64, you may be scratching your heads. This Bomberman 64 was released in 1997 and was the first 3D Bomberman game. The late-release Japan-only Bomberman 64 differs graphically with its two-dimensional sprite work. It's interesting to see 2D sprite-based games on 5th-generation consoles, especially the Nintendo 64. I know it's not unheard of, but it seems the focus at the time was on this brand-new 3D technology, in the West at least. 2D isn't the first thing that comes to mind with the N64. A lot of established franchises were taking a crack at 3D, Bomberman included. Some fared the jump well, others not so much. Gameplay is what you would expect from a Bomberman game. Defeat all of the opponents on screen, find an exit. In addition, this game contains various minigames much like its spin-off, Bomberman Land. While I enjoy this game and its style, Bomberman 64 was not a good fit for release outside of Japan, given its release date, late 2001. The swan song for the Nintendo 64 in the PAL region was Adin Chronicles, the First Mage, originally released on March 23, 2001. Adin Chronicles is a turn-based RPG that follows the quest of a squire named, something. Honestly, I can't recall much about this game. All I remember is just getting lost and bored and getting frustrated a lot. From what I've gathered, people are generally mixed about this game. I'm always looking out for games that really take advantage of the N64, and sadly this isn't one of them. While I'll admit, the size of the in-game world is remarkable for the system, that's really its strongest point. After that, the gameplay is just a buggy slog. The Nintendo 64 isn't revered for its RPGs, and this game does not challenge that notion. Had it come out a few years earlier, it may have been a bigger splash. The game's development started in 1998 for the Nintendo 64 disk drive add-on. This attachment was delayed until 1999 and released in Japan only. With the cancellation of its international release, the development cycle of many games, including this one, were probably thrown into despair because they had to retool the game for just a Nintendo 64 cartridge, leaving a lot on the cutting room floor. With its late release and utter mediocrity, the Nintendo 64 went off with a whimper in Europe. Hope you enjoyed this video. I wanted to make something different while also digging into my roots a bit. If you'd want to see another video like this, stick around and subscribe. Maybe tell a friend or send an approval and hit that like button.